creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
I'm attorney Clinton Paris, and Tampa's my community. I grew up here, went to school here, and my wife and I make our home here. What makes Tampa special are its people. So when I represent someone injured in my community, it's personal. Call my office and speak to a real lawyer and not some referral service. I will fight the insurance companies to get the settlement that you deserve. At the law office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being heard.
True Black Essentials is a retail opportunity to bring Black businesses under one roof, where every product on every shelf in every aisle will be Black owned and Black produced by people all over the world. Statistics show that the $1.3 trillion of spending power that we have as Black people can easily be turned into each Black person having $2 million if we were to shop Black for 2 years. So True Black Essentials will launch an e-commerce store on November 1st, 2020, but we will open up brick and mortar stores in Atlanta, New Orleans, Charlotte, Houston, and Jacksonville, with the very first store opening in Atlanta, June 19, 2020.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As you see, Mike Washington is still out on assignment, and even BJ Jones, extraordinary HBCU football analyst, is out taking care of business as well. So we asked Joe Clay of the 1876 Sports and Culture to show up and show out. They'll give you some insights as we go down and tell you what took place on Saturday and give you a little update of what's taking place today with Tennessee State as they're hosting Murray State, a top 25 team. We'll let you know how that's going for those that haven't had updates. But welcome to episode 116 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports from institutions large and small. From NAIA to the NCAA, we're sharing insights of information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, for our Sunday weekend edition of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Again, we have Joe Clay sitting in for us. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing well, wonderful, after a great Saturday of HBCU football.
No doubt about it. Charles, how you doing?
We're making it today, Dr. Cavil. You know, we back in the lab trying to research everything and It's a beautiful sunny day. I'd love to be out on the golf course.
Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry we're cheating you out of a little bit of some of your golf time there, but the people need you, and you know you here to get it won't. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, again, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike is out on assignment, so we have Joe Clay and Charles Bishop. With that, we're filming from our home studio, and right here in terms of the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. With that, let's just chop it up. Before we get into this updates, obviously, any HBCU news that you wanted to share for today's show, Charles?
Oh, well, you know, we got all our games from yesterday that we have to take a look at. Should be an interesting deep dive, and you know, it's some fun stuff, some fun analysis, if you will, from yesterday. Very exciting action yesterday. Looking forward to just jumping right into it.
Yeah, we can close out on the chapter of basketball on the men's side. Those teams that got the first round win, or first four, as they like to say it, closed out. Texas Southern played pretty well against Michigan, but ended up going down to double digits, and Gonzaga took it to Norfolk State. They played pretty well, all things considered, and obviously Thursday we told you about Stillman coming out of the NIH Sweet 16 as they didn't get it made. Women are up to bat today. Jackson State with a tough charge in terms of Baylor. Number one now. So give us an update. Any early update scores there?
The Baylor, well, the game just tipped off. Baylor just got the opening points there, a little turnover there by Jackson State, and Baylor comes back down on a quick fast break. So it's quickly 4-0 Baylor on top of Jackson State.
Yeah, it's a tough one there. And then obviously you have A&T as a number 2 seed taking on the 15th seed there. But we're going to get into more of the football action, and now it's squarely that time. This Tuesday, we'll give you some updates of what took place of the full series of baseball games. But let's get into the mix. Let's just jump in there, and what everybody wants to talk about, obviously, is that big matchup. Jackson State was coming in, top 25 team, 3-0 in conference race, taking on the Alabama State team that had a couple of weeks off, had that early tough loss to Southern, and we'll talk about that Texas Southern game a little after this. But big matchup in Montgomery. Everybody came out, showed out. Dion was in prime time, but it was all about Alabama State and those Hornets winning 35-28, classic matchup back and forth. But let's get into some particulars of what you saw in that game. I'm going to start with Joe Clay, our guest, to be nice, and then we'll come to you to bat it up and see what your thoughts is and make you sim on this even a little more, Charles Bishop, but I know you've had time. Wait. And to your credit, you said on Thursday coming into this matchup, there were some things that concern you about this game that particularly Jackson State didn't necessarily do well. So people sometimes will confuse the fact that obviously you're a proud Jackson State alum, as well as Texas Southern University for that matter, in terms of your graduate studies. But when we hear, it's about a professional framework of how we deliver the information.
Sure.
So let me go back to you, Joe. What did you see in this matchup? We had a chance to text a little bit back and forth, and you were giving some analysis to the game. Now you get to share it with the people. What are your initial thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, I was already I was kind of pushing back to the fans of Jackson State to just be leery that don't get overconfident with the first 2 games that you played. You played 2 games and you destroyed 2 teams that you were supposed to beat. So I hope Jackson State fans weren't too overconfident. So then you came in this week against the Alabama State game.
No Jackson State fans, doesn't
it? Was that
overconfident? That's what.
Is that just how it goes?
Yeah, that's just how
I mean, it is what it is. So Jackson State fans are likened to Dallas Cowboy fans. So you'll never ever have to worry about Jackson State fans and the confidence part. That's just
never like a confidence. So those first 2 games just exacerbated that situation then. So you came into a game against Alabama State. I think they did an excellent job, obviously, you have to give your hats off, take your hats off to the coaching staff, because they obviously got that team ready to play over during the COVID protocols situation. Their defense stepped up, showed that they have some ballers on that squad on the defensive side of the ball. Even though Jackson State scored 28 points, I thought that was a nice outing by Alabama State's defense. And obviously, offensively, to put 35 points up against a Jackson State defense that had up to this point shown that they have some players on that side of the ball as well. I know they got some other guys coming in, but they have some ballers on that squad right now. So to be able to put up 35 points on a Jackson State team that came up with all that energy, all that fire, all that hype, I don't think you could have asked for anything more from Alabama State.
No doubt about it. Let me shout out to LaShawn Harris, Brent Brunson, Dexter Hill, Jimmy L. Wilson. He's all still talking about how he got his first four right. Man, he's still in basketball mode. I guess it is tournament time. Brent Brunson, as we said. Anthony Weston, what's up, everyone? Doing it on a Sunday. Yes, we got you. Lawrence D. White, Chris LeBlanc, Stephen A. Miller's talking about, we got us a special show. Yes, check us out. Sundays, and we'll give it to you. Demetrius Minor Gatewood, that's a former student of mine doing great things out there, finishing up his master's degree at LSU, bringing it. Just give them a couple of more shouts out for some other people out there. Talking about the Fire, they all in it. J-State, both teams played well. Man, that running back from Bama State, yeah, he gave it to you. He was all over the place in so many days. Gray, as they call him, we knew about him. We told you to watch out for Gray. He's the real deal. Charles, what are your thoughts in terms of just your opening salvo in terms of this matchup?
Well, first and foremost, hats off to Alabama State. They were the better team yesterday. They played a tremendous game yesterday. This is a team, and I think I touched on it when we last talked to Dr. Gill Thursday. They're a talented team. They have 5 preseason All-SWAC selections. You take a look especially at their defensive line, their front 7. Christian Clark, 6'1", 363. You got a Maryland transfer, Brandon Gaddy. You pair them also with Andrew Ogletree. He's 6'4", 280. And then they have a thumper linebacker, Colton Adams. They call him Bubba, 6'2", 220. They really flew around yesterday, and they made Jackson State very one-dimensional in the first half. They did a tremendous job, I thought, of shutting down something that I think Jackson State does very well, and that's run the football with Tyson Alexander. So I think that contributed to a lot of things. That Jackson State just was not able to run the ball until we get to the second half, and that's where I thought that you had some very good cat and mouse games in terms of the strategy going forward. Jackson State kind of took the wraps off Jalen Jones. I think some of the question going into the game was Jalen Jones healthy? He got nicked up a little bit in the Valley game. So we didn't really get an opportunity to see his athleticism in the first half, but that totally changed, I believe, in the second half. Jackson State only had 20 yards of rushing in the first half, but Jalen Jones finished with 145 yards rushing. They really took the wraps off of him. But, when you take a look at it, Jackson State's offense is not geared to the quarterback throwing 50 times, and that's what happened yesterday. Jalen Jones was 19 of 50 with 2 interceptions, 180 yards. So that's a prescription I think that the rest of the conference is going to take note of, take the runaway, and you kind of you hurt Jackson State tremendously from an offensive standpoint. I can't say enough about what Ezra Gray did to Jackson State defensively. I think Coach Prime talked about it in his post-game presser. They got to finish. I mean, he really gashed them in the fourth quarter. And you thought when Jackson State kind of grabbed control of the game in the third quarter, going into that game, all the talk had been about third quarter woes. Jackson State had been outscored 7-6 in the third quarter, but they made the plays that they needed to make, and they grabbed the momentum, and credit to Alabama State for snatching that momentum back. We start the fourth quarter, and they have a 10-play, 95-yard drive that tied the score. Can't say enough about that. There was a kickoff return. Whether his foot was in or out, that's debatable. I'm sure a lot of people will debate it, but the call was made that he was out of bounds. And Alabama State, to their credit, they made the stop. They made the 3 and out. They snatched that momentum back in the fourth quarter. So hats off to Travis Pearson, Alabama State's defensive coordinator. Alabama State did things they needed to do yesterday, and they got the win.
Now you jump in there and you talk about a lot of other teams looking at the recipe of what Alabama State was able to do to Jackson State to make them one-dimensional. In terms of the teams on Jackson State's rest of the schedule, what other teams do you think have the ability in terms of players to actually do similar things that what Alabama State did?
It's an uphill climb the rest of the season for Jackson State. I think quality teams are in front of them. When you have Southern, you have Prairie View and Alabama A&M. Everybody's going to borrow from the blueprint and see how Jalen Jones reacts. So especially when you take a look at a defense like Prairie View with all those starters on the defensive side of the ball, 4 all SWAC selectors over there on the defensive side of the ball as well. So they're going to be especially tough. Southern, you saw what they were able to do last night against Texas Southern. So the meat of the schedule is coming up for Jackson State, and we'll see how they respond.
Certainly, and I'll go back to you and let you have a closing thought on this, Joe Clay. But before I do that, the game was close. First downs, 24-21. Total yards, Jackson State 350 yards. Alabama State put up 466 yards. To your point in terms of the rushing, Alabama State was able to put 209 yards rushing. Jackson State, although it may not look like it from a running back position, total yards, they were able to put 170 yards. But as you talked about in terms of passing, they were only able to put up 180 yards passing, 257 for Alabama State. So much more balance in regards to what they were able to do when you look at that. Time of possession was pretty even, 29, just under 30 minutes, basically for both teams, essentially, when you have it. Turnovers was similar, 2 turnovers, Jackson State 3 for Alabama State in terms of what looks at there. But that freshman quarterback, he's really playing well.
Ryan Nettles, yeah.
What are your thoughts in terms of Ryan Nettles? Let me start with you, Joe Clay. Any accolades that you want to talk about Ryan Nettles? Again, coming in as a freshman, 6'4", 190 pounds out of Evergreen, Alabama. Hurt himself in high school, so may have not got all the looks that he could have got, but certainly sounds like Alabama State and the fans are pleased about what went on over there. What are your thoughts after watching Ryan Nettles for the second time this season?
Well, obviously, Alabama State got themselves a jewel. An unfortunate incident with the injury allowed him to probably go somewhere where he may not have gone without that injury. And it probably worked out for the best for both he and Alabama State. He threw for 257 yards as a freshman. That is outstanding. Again, against a defense that had shown itself pretty well. So if you're Jackson State, I'm concerned. I'm giving up 257 yards to a freshman quarterback. That's a problem. You give up 195 yards to one running back.
Ezra Gray. Let's say it again.
Yeah, I mean, who closed it out with a little bit over a minute left in the game. How do you give up that long run? Man, if you're a J-State fan, that was painful to watch that run. So,
well, and I think Coach Brown talked on it in the post-game presser. So there's been a whole lot of debate, and he mentioned, one of the things, if 10 people are doing the right thing and one person is out of place, that's how those breakdowns happen. Talked to a few, former players last night. I don't want to hear all that, but I think there's some truth in. There was some adjustment breakdowns that did not happen yesterday, and that's something Jackson State is going to have to pay attention to going forward. And I sent word over to Alabama State's quarterbacks coach Richard Moncrief yesterday. He has one in Ryan Nettles. Tremendous game yesterday, and the big thing, and I think they touched on it in the broadcast. That starting offensive line, all redshirt freshmen and one redshirt sophomore, in front of a redshirt freshman quarterback. So, Jackson State, Coach Prime, and they talk about you better get to Jackson State now before the reinforcements get there in the fall. I would say the same thing about Alabama State. They got some ball players over there too. So, and I say this, the SWAC East has gotten real fun because when Alcorn gets back in the mix, Alabama State, Alabama A&M, Jackson State, it's going to be a real dogfight over there. So SWAC West, I think these things are cyclical. You've had your fun now for about a good 7-8 years, and that SWAC East might be on the come up.
It's a beautiful
Like
thing.
you said, we're getting Alcorn on the West, but everybody else playing in the East adding to it. Like you said, Jackson State is standing up. Alabama State is what we see. Alabama A&M obviously is playing with house money. And then you add the 2 expansion teams with FAMU and Bethune-Cookman, and everybody that has watched the greater perspective of HBCU understands that those are serious, formidable teams. And we're not even talking about the talent in general in Florida, which comes with that. It starts to spread out even more throughout the SWAC now, which is interesting because now you have the combination of having Florida and Texas in the same conference. It should be fun. But talking about another freshman quarterback, Jalen Brown got a chance as a freshman out of Austin, Texas, 6'2", 220 pounds to start for Texas Southern University because the first 2 quarterbacks for Texas Southern University got hurt in that Prairie View game. I want to ask this before we get into this matchup. What are your thoughts of playing a rivalry game to kick off the season? Obviously, you were supposed to play Grambling and Prairie View in that matchup. That was held off because of the freeze. And obviously, in this situation, everybody is playing everybody. So the spring ball is what it is. But I'm talking more in general. You've seen this happen over and over for Texas Southern in terms of quarterbacks getting injured. You get injuries anyway in football. But just what are your thoughts about playing a rivalry game to kick off things? We see that now going to start in the East Division with FAMU and Jackson State. There's a lot of excitement because it happens, but in terms of on the other side, let me go to you, Joe Clay, before we get in your analysis of freshmen. What is just your overall thought about playing a rivalry game early in the season?
I love it. You got to kick the season off hot. You got to be ready. You may have implications that affect you for the season, so you better come with your A game. No excuses. Both teams are in the same situation. So the coach, it's incumbent upon the coaching staff to make sure that every snap they take during a summer preparation is worth it, is efficient. And hey, it is what it is, man. You just got to lace them up and be prepared to be on your A game for that first game of the season. I'm sure there are a lot of coaches who really don't care to have that rivalry game, but PV and TSU been doing it forever with the Labor Day Classic. So it is what it is, man. I think there should be more of it throughout college sports. Instead of having those gimme games, those, zero week games where you're playing a patsy or you're playing a game that really doesn't mean anything, that doesn't have any weight. Let's play a game, start the season off with a game that means something. I'm with it.
Great point. Charles, what are your thoughts?
I mean, if I'm a fan, I love it. I mean, but you get to hear from the coaches too. Like they can't stand it. They need that. They want to get that quote unquote practice game in so they can work out the kinks so we can alumni can really evaluate them in game 2 or 3. But as a fan, you love to see these huge matchups. Jackson State FAMU, that's going to be huge that Labor Day weekend. But the fan in me loves it, but the alumni in me is like, I wish we had one game in front of that one before we go into that one. But I understand the excitement of it all. Joe, you mentioned Prairie View and Texas Southern. They've been doing it for a while now, and it's just something I'm not used to. As a Jackson State fan, you almost you need that game before Tennessee State. That sort of thing. So that's an interesting perspective how Prairie View and Texas Southern jump right into it.
I think you should spread it out, though. I think you should spread that out. You shouldn't have one team doing it all the time. If we're gonna make that an element within the SWAC to bring interest and attention, I think you should not have just one or two teams starting the season off with the rivalry game. You should mix that throughout the entire SWAC teams.
I like that if you're going to use it for the marketing components that you're talking about where fans get excited, everybody should be exposed to the fact that they may have to do a first thing. And thinking about that's kind of how ACC started marketing its program. At first, it was just a program with Florida State doing the Thursday games. And then when they joined the conference, one of the things ACC was doing to try to rebrand what they were doing they kicked off the season with a conference matchup. And a couple of first years, it was Miami, Florida State, and then they started rotating different teams to do it. So great points. And now you got the television package from SEC with ESPN and the Big 10. They also find a way to look at a conference game or two. They kick off the season. But then in addition, they started copying the HBCU models with these classic games. So now you have these intra-conference matchups or interregional conferences where they have these big games, which is something to point out as you talk about. But getting back into this, as we talked about the quarterback, Jaylen Brown for Texas Southern. Southern destroyed Texas Southern, frankly, 51-23. It was close for a half. And that second half adjustments, you talking about Alabama State being able to pound Jackson State with the run. Southern certainly did it. Skelton had over 245 yards, combined yards, 174 passing with 2 touchdowns. Did have the interception early in the game, but ran for 71 yards. Southern rushed total 258 yards combined on 45 carries. Just amazing. But what are your thoughts before we get into a little bit more of the matchups? What are your thoughts, Joe, in terms of the freshman quarterback for Texas Southern University, Jaylen Brown?
I think he showed promise. Anytime you throw a freshman quarterback into the fire like that, you're going to get some good, some bad. You know, you're going to get a lot of bad, and you hope you get some good to evaluate them. Coach McKinley is building talent there. It's going to be a building process. That quarterback shows you some of the talent he's bringing in. I think he obviously needs some more pieces around him, but he's got something to build off of. I'm curious to see if he gets the bulk of the snaps for the rest of the season. I know they've got some injury issues at the QB spot, so that'll be curious to see if he chooses to go to the more seasoned QB, if he becomes healthy and available, or if he chooses to stick with the freshman quarterback. But man, if I'm him, I'm looking for the future. You know, the SWAC is about to be hot, on fire, and highly competitive. So I want to get, you're not going to do much. You're not going to be very competitive for this season. So you might as well give all the reps to the young guys to get them ready to go for the fall.
That's a good take and an interesting take. I want to see what Charles thinks of that. 21-37, 281 yards, a touchdown. Beautiful touchdown before half, 50-plus yards. Had an interception that you could read. You could see it coming when he threw it. And he was like, oh, no, freshman, don't do that. One of those matchups. But same thing with the Alabama State quarterback. But he was able to come back and obviously hold his own. But what are your thoughts on Jaylen Brown for Texas Southern University?
Well, I tell you what, he has a rocket for an arm. That's for sure. He was able to show that off last night. He has a very lively arm. It's like one of my old coaches said, he has one of those 90-mile-an-hour right arm. So very impressive. 21 of 37, 281 yards, like you mentioned. But, at times watching that game last night, Texas Southern's down to their third-string quarterback. To me, it's almost, is there any more snake-bitten program in the SWAC? Because every time they kind of get some things rolling a little bit, and I was really looking forward to seeing how they would look post-Prairie View. That was a great game, great opening weekend, starting off against Prairie View. And, it's the penalties. When they get big runs, it's always something that sets them back. So it's almost as though whenever they take 2 steps forward, they take 3 steps back. So I can understand as a Texas Southern fan how frustrating it is sort of watching their games. And then, it just kind of got out of hand. But this was a prototypical Southern sort of win. It was a prototypical Ladarius Skelton. I think a lot of us were looking to see if John Lampley was actually going to get the start last night. But this was classic Skelton, throw for over 150, run for, close to 150. And that's, they're at their best when he has that play action going and he can, find those crossing patterns, find those tight ends down the seam. That's when Southern gets pretty difficult to stop when Skelton is able to do his read option magic and really, put defenses on their heels with his running ability. So very, very workmanlike effort last night for Southern.
Yeah, they do what they do. Southern's what it does, especially under Coach Odom. That bounce back after 2 weeks, you do not want to be the team after Southern has lost and has two weeks to prepare for their next opponent. It just doesn't end up right. This is Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, along with our HBCU sports analyst, BJ Jones. But sitting in the hot seat for our Sunday edition, special edition, weekend edition, is Joe Clay from 1876 Sports and Culture Podcast. You can catch his show every Tuesday as it's released as a podcast. Look for them to start streaming in the near future, and we'll get you more information on that before the end of the show. But stay with us. It's Dr. Bill Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Talking
They compress the analytic data with your hip hop.
If you know them like I know them,
They gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball.
so listen to Professor.
This is Dr. Bill Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment. BJ Jones is out on assignment. So we brought in the heavy hitter, Joe Clay, 1876 Sports and Culture Podcast. Charles, do you have an update?
Sure. Right now, update from San Antonio, Jackson State down to Baylor 29-10. They're still with 8:43 here in the first half, second quarter, I should say.
That's all right. Come on, Jackson State. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. It's a tough one there. That's a tough one. We understand you playing one of those branded programs with Baylor right now that gets all the talent. It seems like it's a tough hole to go. But with that being said, BSCN has a streaming matchup that they have partnered with BCSG 360 with a couple of matchups that you won't want to miss if you're into the baseball, HBCU baseball, Black College Nines as well as give you a lot of information. But in terms of these games, check it out. Coming up, Savannah State takes on Edward Waters. That's in Jacksonville, Florida. Then you have the matchup in Dallas, which features 4 teams out of the SWAC moving their conference games up that way. Playing some great baseball. You have Prairie View, Grambling, Southern, and Arkansas Pine Bluff involved in those matchups as they are just outside of Dallas getting it done in the minor league ballpark. So go check out some great college baseball action, HBCU specifically. You can go check out BCSN to get some of the particulars. But as we do that, we were talking about finalizing some of the things that were going on with that Southern and Texas Southern matchup. Southern comes out with the win 51-23. They bounced out. They improved to 2-1 on the season, while Texas Southern falls to 0-2 on the season. With that matchup, first downs 24-22, but wasn't quite indicative of the total yards in the game. When Southern put up 460 yards, Texas Southern put up 383 yards. Passing, 202 yards for Southern, 281 for Texas Southern. Rushing is where you're seeing a huge, significant difference. Rushing was 258 yards, as I said, for Southern, just 102 yards for Texas Southern. It's hard when you're one-dimensional and the team knows what you're doing in terms of get it done. And then you had, obviously, the 2 costly turnovers for Texas Southern. You had a chance just before half where you thought maybe there might be a little momentum, where you had a first down where it looks like Texas Southern was going to put it back to a 2-point difference at halftime if they were able to sneak it in the end zone before that. Penalty, just the type of, like you said, snake bitten in so many different ways. If it isn't injuries, it's penalties that are costly. You saw that in the tough loss to Prairie View in some ways in parts of the game. But that penalty took away that first down. Wasn't very obvious, but obviously referees call what they see. And it caused Texas Southern, they weren't able to rebound. And ultimately, Southern scored before the end and took a touchdown lead into the half, getting it done in so many different ways. With that, anything else you see from Southern, Joe Clay, in terms of what you think, how they have rebounded, what they're coming up? Obviously, they had that tough loss to Pine Bluff, which we'll talk a little bit about Pine Bluff and Grambling, which is surprising everybody, at least in my mind, that Southern lost to. But what are your thoughts in terms of Southern? They have the bulk of their schedule to come lately. As you said, they still play Prairie View. They got Jackson State they're going to play. So it's going to be interesting to see where they are. And they still got the Grambling team that is struggling right now. What do you think in terms of Southern moving forward?
I think they did an excellent job on bouncing back from that loss last week. You knew they were going to show up. They were not going to lay an egg. Coach Odoms is an excellent coach, probably one of the best in the SWAC. So I fully expected to see what we saw last week. Yesterday. Their running game is strong. I know a lot of that is led by their quarterback, but I like their running game. The passing game does what it needs to do. They may run into some problems when they come up against a stouter defense, such as a Prairie View defense that has a very good front seven. So I look forward to that game. I look forward to seeing Southern's running game against Prairie View's defensive line. But I believe Southern they look very similar to how they've looked the last couple of years. An adequate passing game, a good running game, and a defense that may give up some points, but they're going to stand up when they need to. So I'm going to be very excited to see a time when Southern gets a prolific quarterback back in their offense. What is that going to look like? Because they haven't really had one for a while. So curious to see that. It's a little scary to think about because they find a way to win regardless. So
yeah, that's a great point. I don't know how everybody wants to see it, but point well taken. But with that said, Ladarius Skelton, before we move on to our final matchup, Ladarius Skelton, Heckle, Jekyll, he's up, down, but when he does it pretty well. What are your thoughts in terms of either Southern or in terms specifically with the quarterback, senior, 6'2", 210-pound Pine Bluff, Arkansas, as you know, Ladarius Skelton in his bounce back game himself?
Well, I mean, always the question like we asked Thursday, which Ladarius Skelton do we get? Do we get the dynamic Ladarius Skelton, or do we get the Skelton that can be inaccurate, sometimes passing? And I thought when Dawson Odom said that they were going to get back to basics, I thought this was the sort of game that we were going to see where they just kind of bludgeon you on the ground. And again, they made use of Skelton's athleticism. I think we're at a point now where we know that his athleticism is what's going to take Southern far. He is not a traditional drop back passer, that sits up and reads defenses and things of that nature. He is a dynamic read option quarterback, and he puts a lot of pressure on defenses with his legs. So I think they did just enough. I mean, I think those are the stat lines that I'm kind of I know with Skelton when he's somewhere under 20 attempts or so, but he's rushed for over 100 yards, but he's under 20 attempts passing. I know that's right where Southern needs to be offensively, and then defensively they get after you. And that's what they did last night in terms of getting a couple sacks there on Texas Southern's quarterback. Another timely turnover. They had another pick six. They do it always on special teams. They had a kickoff return last night. Just a very fundamentally solid team when they're playing well. So it'll be interesting with Southern going down the stretch. That loss to UAPB looms large.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. In this shortened season, all those games really matter in terms of who you lose to, if it's not directly in terms of who you lost to or how it would affect somebody else. So it'll be fascinating. Let's move on to probably the biggest stunner to some people's eyes, if it's nothing other than the brand really going to 0-3 on the season, and then the way they took it on the chin. Arkansas Pine Bluff 48, Grambling 21. And this was in Grambling, where they don't lose much, but they've already lost 2 times. That's one program that is not going to want to play any games in the spring. Moving forward, it's just not working out for them. But before we get into this matchup, let me give you an update and give you some insight in terms of Tennessee State hosting Murray State that comes into the game 3-0. Obviously, Tennessee State got the big win last week off. That included a 62-yard field goal with the special teams player of the week for OVC getting it done. Well, he's kicked another field goal in this game, so they trail at halftime 14-10. Tennessee State drove right down the field for the first drive, got a tough penalty, took them out of scoring a touchdown opportunity. They ended up having to go on a field goal, a bad snap, and they couldn't get a field goal off. They stop them 3-and-out for Murray State. Then they come back right down the field and drive again, score, able to pass, run. They go up 7-0. Then Murray State explodes on offense for 2 touchdowns. Tennessee State did close out on the half with a nice drive, but they had to settle for a field goal. So as I said, at halftime, you have a score of 14-10. Stats at the half. Tennessee State, total yards 213 to 173 for Murray State. 14-10 on first down. Passing specifically, Tennessee State has 108 yards, 79 for Murray State. Rushing was 105 yards to 94. Penalties hurting Tennessee State, 7 for 65 yards. Murray State just has 4 for 45. Murray State does have the turnover that has kept Tennessee State in the game, 14-10, if you would. So enough about that. I was able to watch some of that game before we got in here, so really want to get into this big game of the week for a lot of folks and get your insight in that when you talk about Skylar Perry, how he played 346 yards, 4 touchdowns, had an interception. He was 18-30. Then you have wide receivers playing well for Arkansas Pine Bluff, including Josh Wilkes, 6'3", 183, senior, Rock Hill, South Carolina. And those that would listen to it, we told you, they probably have arguably the best 3 wide receivers in the conference right now playing. And they're starting to show you why we thought that in terms of that matchup. In terms of that game, Josh Wilkes put up 131 yards and a touchdowns on just 6 receptions. Big play offense. Defense is really where they're getting it done, though, in a lot of ways. They had a big pick 6 early in that game that really put Grambling State on the heels. It was nip and tuck for the first half. It was just a 14-7 game at the half. Then they exploded for 28 points in the third quarter to really put it away. Grambling scored late in the third as well as the fourth quarter to kind of make it somewhat more decent. But 48-21, they really got drawn. So you talking about, as you like to say, Charles, somebody on the ledge?
Yeah. I think my grandma put
Grambling on the ledge.
They're definitely on the ledge. I'm definitely on the ledge. And then, our colleague Mo Carter, he showed me Grambling's schedule to start off 2021. It doesn't get any easier the first 4 games. So it's like, gee whiz, I don't know what the prescription is for Grambling right now. Offensively, they have no identity. They have no fluidness, if you will. Yesterday, we got a chance to see Elijah Walker. Grambling had 281 yards passing, and 77 of it came from the running back Keelan Elton. So it has to be frustrating to watch the quarterback play drop off in the way that it has with both Higgbottom and Elijah Walker. What I've been really surprised about, though, with Grambling is the fact that they just have not been able to run the ball whatsoever. You take a look, Keelan Elder. Yes, they only had 87 net yards rushing yesterday. That's just not going to get it done, especially with the sort of firepower that they have with Keelan Elder, C.J. Russell, and Damian Brooks. So that has been the surprising part. Definitely the Grambling defense not being able to get stops when they need to get stops. But, kudos to Doc Gamble yesterday. That opening Joe Frazier left hook was that onside kick to start the game. That just, put you in the mindset. Okay.
Yeah, we here.
Yeah, we here. Even though they didn't get, points out of that, but it was just the statement like, big deal. We're in the hole. Yeah. You're in for a ball game. So, credit to UAPB yesterday. I mean, Skylar Perry, he's playing lights out ball, and we knew coming into the season that I thought, the weapons were going to be DeJuan Miller and Harry Ballard. Harry Ballard had a big game yesterday. DeJuan Miller only one catch yesterday, but it was Josh Wilkes who stepped up for Pine Bluff. And then you also have, the speedster in the slot, Tyron Ralph. So they got some explosive guys in that passing game that puts a lot of pressure on secondaries.
No doubt about it. When you talk about that rushing 87 yards, that was on 34 attempts, 2.6 yard attempt. And obviously, Pine Bluff didn't do much better. They only had 56 yards on 36 attempts, 1.6. But they could throw the ball. They didn't really have to rush the ball. And they still control the line of scrimmage in terms of them being able to pass like they would want to. And they just are getting it done in terms of that matchup. Joe Clay, what did you see in that game?
The thing that points out to me is Skylar Perry, 6'3", 215. This guy, he's from, for those who don't know a lot about his background, he's from Edna High School in New Orleans, Louisiana, a high school that won 4 back-to-back state championships. He got at least one of those. This guy's a winner. He knows how to win. So in the SWAC, when you've got a quarterback who's truly a dual threat, can throw it all over the field like he can and can run it. He was the leading rusher with 38 yards rushing, and he has the weapons to throw the ball to. You got a chance against any team in the SWAC when you bring a talent in at the quarterback position like that. So to me, he's the leader of that team this year. He's putting it all together. He cannot be stopped, in my opinion, with the weapons that he has. He's going to put up points against everybody. I don't care who it is in the SWAC. So SWAC, you better be ready. Every team in the SWAC that's on Pine Bluff schedule, you better be ready to stop that prolific offense that has awakened this year. So to me, he is a potential player of the year.
I see you, Cameo Stokes.
So
UAP got some representation in here today.
Yeah, they deserve it. We're going to give them some
yeah,
love.
Man. You got to.
Check out these big plays that you're talking about. Josh Wilkes, we gave you 6 for 131 yards, but look at some of the big play capabilities they had. He had a long for 60 yards. Ballard the third comes back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Harry, he gives you one for 58 yards.
Mm-hmm.
He goes 7 for 124. Well, that's no big deal. He's like, all right, we'll find a way. We can do some stuff, get those two players out there. Well, you had another one. Brown goes 2 for 59 and 2 touchdowns with a long of 31. Not to be outdone, Ralph comes in there with a long of 21. He does 2 for 28. Doesn't get the end zone, but he has a big play. And so they have weapons that can give you chunk yards. And that is a special advantage playing this game when you don't necessarily have to walk the ball down the field. Now, if you can do that, you're a special type offense. We've seen that a little bit about Alabama State, but they were able to put that explosive yards. Now, they did it in the run. Now you see a team that does it in the air. And you have those combinations, boy. It gets interesting and dangerous. And as you said, with Scott Perry, he gave you a long rush of 23 yards. So just when you think you can cover everybody, he says, all right, I see an open lane. I'm going to sneak you for this one as well. And get the first down, the big meaty first down, chunk yards to move us down the field. And if nothing else, that flips the field. So even when they don't score and they get these big yardage, they keep you on your heels because they force you. Now, a defense that are playing so well, they make you travel the field because they always have you with these chunk yards and just putting you on there. So you talk about what they were able to do on the defensive side. It's also impressive. I'm going to go back to you, Joe Clay, and talk a little bit about how they impress you, not only offense, but what it surprised me is what they're able to do on the defensive side of the ball as well.
Yep. If you told me that Pine Bluff was going to hold Grambling to 21 points, I would not have believed you. I don't know if the credit is to go to Pine Bluff or if you give it to the lack of offensive explosion from Grambling. We're not used to seeing this from Grambling. So I'm going to give it a little bit of in both columns. Pine Bluff's defense is playing well, and we're not seeing a typical Grambling offense.
The reason I say it's a little bit more leaning to me, Pine Bluff, is what they were able to do for Southern, which we know is an explosive team. Now, they had the turnovers and they scored late in the game, but they had Southern down to just 2 touchdowns in the first half. So this is a team that is playing pretty solid defense. And as you said, as rich as some of the offense are in this conference, I'm not sure if you're going to get any defense just to stop these high-powered offense. But to say that they've done this against Southern, I agree with you in terms of Grambling. We see that they're struggling on the offensive side of the ball. So point well taken there. Anything you'd like to add to this, Charles, in regards to what you see Pine Bluff doing, not just on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball?
You know what? Shout out to Pine Bluff's offensive line. You know, they kind of have that look of that old Mississippi Valley tons of fun offensive line. They got some big ones up there. And, you know, Skylar Perry has an opportunity to sit back there and wing it all over the place. The more surprising thing is the number of explosion plays I think Grambling has given up. That's been surprising. They gave up a few of them against Jackson State where Tyson Alexander was able to get off. They seemed as though they kind of corrected against Prairie View, but those explosion plays showed up again. You touched on it, Dr. Cavil. Josh Wiltz had a 60-yard play. Harry Ballard, 58-yard play. Jeremy Brown, a 31-yard play. So, you know, credit to UAPB for getting it done. And, you know, I tell you what, when does Prairie View and UAPB get together?
Ooh,
I
don't.
It's like the last, well, it was going to be the last game, but obviously got the rematch on
the 13th, huh?
Yeah. So it's
I think it's April 13th, and it's at Pine Bluff.
Okay, I need ESPN to flex though. I need to see though.
Hey, as a PV alum, I'm a little nervous.
Hey, and let me tell you about this. Think about this. 3 of the last 4 for Pine Bluff are at home. The road game they have is against Ballard. So even the tougher competition they have at home. So as long as they don't get too full of themselves, the schedule really favors them in a lot of ways. Remember this also, while Prairie View's gotten off 2-0 hot, this season is moved from the fall. So they're ineligible to play in the championship. So they even have that edge against Prairie View. So Prairie View is going to want to do it on the field because they won't be able to play for a conference championship in the championship game. They can only make their statement in terms of the regular season. So that's going to be interesting. With that
I'm going to say it now, Dr. Cavil. In terms of what you said, in terms of not getting a little too full of themselves, be careful with Valley. Valley is a much better team than that 43-7 that you saw, because those were a couple of late touchdowns from Jackson State. But they are very, very solid. I'll be honest with you. I was very surprised with what Coach Vince Danzy has there with Valley, and they have a pretty decent quarterback. So I don't think you're just going to just club Valley. I know I've said it before, but that this time I'm serious about it. They really have a decent team.
I'm going to do this for Mike since he's not here. Valley.
Yeah, I know, right? All right.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. The only thing I'd say the reason I pointed out for Pine Bluff, the Pine Bluff and Valley is like their rival.
Yeah.
All right. And so that's a game that I don't see Pine Bluff slipping on in terms of them going on the road, because it's their rivalry game per se. And so they're naturally going to get up for that one. It's the other games, one that I say that you might want to think about is the Prairie View matchup. But the last time Prairie View and Pine Bluff came together, Prairie View put all them points on them. So I don't think they're going to sleep on them either. So, yeah, they might get full of themselves in that. But I think when you get it done, I think the coach has that magic ball. The other thing that I heard they did in terms of this matchup is they talked about the Ghostbusters. As I was telling you about, they have the Ghostbusters. The other thing that I really like that this coach does, he understands how to get his team up. They played the videos from the last 2 years where Grambling got those close wins and played the fight song that the band was playing, sending them home. They played that all practice all week long. And so they had this team fired up. So I think this coach understands how to emotionally make sure he gets his teams up. So I just don't see him sleeping on anybody. I kind of threw that out there because that's the thing you got to say, but your point is well taken in getting in that. As we start to close it up at the top here, I did want to sneak in. We'll get into this more on Thursday where we really get into the matchups. But these are the games coming up this Saturday. Obviously, you had the Sunday game with Prairie View at Jackson State. There was going to be an ESPN2 game, so it has been postponed. But you have the Grambling at Alabama A&M, 0-3. Alabama A&M 1-0. Alabama has not played in a couple of weeks, so they could be rusty. But I know they're going to want to make a statement. They want to keep up with the race, especially after Alabama State won. Jackson State has got the conference loss. So it's going to be fascinating to see what that looks like. That will be on ESPN to be determined in terms of the time of that game. And you have Alabama State and Pine Bluff. I think game of the week in a lot of ways. That's the one I say that you might see Pine Bluff, to me, if you call them slipping, because they coming off the big win. You're not playing the same mistaken brand. What does the coach do to keep the focus at Alabama State, which we know now is a very talented team? It might help the fact that Pine Bluff sees that they just got that big victory over Jackson State, which should catch anybody's mind. But that's the one that I think is going to be interesting. It's also on ESPN3 to be determined in terms of matchups. Quickly, let me go to Joe. Any of those matchups, one that you have a more interest in the other? Anything that we should keep our eyes on with one of those matchups?
Well, I'll say for the Pine Bluff Prairie View matchup, it scares me because PV will have just come off a game against Southern. We all know that PV has a problem with Southern. So they will either have gotten beat physically by Southern, or they will have had an emotional high against Southern to overcome the mental hurdle that we've had. Either way, Prairie View is not going to be 100%, in my opinion, when they go to Pine Bluff. The Pine Bluff game against Alabama State. Yeah, hey, the Pine Bluff's defense may have a down game, but I don't see that offense having a down game with that quarterback and those receivers. They're going to put up points. They wake up in the morning and they just put up points. That's just what they do from a talent standpoint. So we'll see how that goes, but those are the two games that interest me.
Yeah, I want you to focus on Grambling, Alabama A&M, and then you want to sneak something back in to Joe Clay on the Alabama State Pine Bluff. You can do that as well.
Well, I mean, Pine Bluff and Arkansas.
You done made Charles sit back. So
Pine Bluff and Bama State. Pine Bluff, they got the spotlight this weekend. So that offense going against Bama State's defense, that front seven. I can attest to that front seven. There ain't no running going on with Big Christian Clark there in the middle. So that's going to be a fun little matchup. So, all right, Pine Bluff, you got the spotlight this weekend. Let's see what happens.
We'll see if they can take the spotlight.
Oh, I love it. This is why we do our Sunday version of this show. And watch us over the rest of the season. We'll sneak in some different type of guests, like you see Joe Clay. We'll try to get Tyler Carr in here from HBCU Game Day. Rob Galloway, to get him in here. He was going to sneak in here and maybe give Charles the business a little bit.
Yeah, I know he was.
Always going to do it. He already got to you. I bet you.
Oh, he friend requested me and everything. I said, look at this.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
I'll see you October 19th, Rob.
What they say is tough in the SWAC. I think they have
a
page out there dedicated to it, just to let you know. That'll do it. We're up to the top of the hour. Let's get out of here and make sure folks can get their Sunday back. Want to thank all the followers that snuck in here and gave us some love. A shout out to Pine Bluff. Shout out to Alabama State. Big wins, getting it done. Shout out to Southern, bouncing back. With that, thank you for listening to Inside HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. On our Sunday edition, you see us with BJ Jones. Today we had Joe Clay sitting in the hot seat, giving us some love from 1876 Sports and Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. Check us out this Sunday. We'll flex it just to see what is best for the schedule. Make sure we can get much updates for all games in. As we know, Tennessee State is playing on Sunday, so we'll flex. Just stay with us, keep us on the dial on Sunday, and we'll see what we can get you, the HBCU football news that you want. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. DrKenyattaCavil on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We look forward to next week. as we discuss the latest news in the lab. Dream big, continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Joe Clay?
I'm out.
Charles?
Course.
Lecture.
Dismissed.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball, who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, yes sir.